Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast series of Unicorps Insight, where we are demystifying e-governance. I'm your host, Sushant Dubey. Our guest today is a very well-known name in e-governance industry. But before I introduce her to all of you, let me try to encapsulate her vast journey to let you know and let you understand the impact of her work. Let me quote Ravindranath Tagore. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when dawn is still dark. Her journey reflects this faith, building systems and institutions when dawn of digital governance in India was still far away. When we talk about India's digital governance journey today, we often focus on platforms, scale, and speed. But what we rarely talk about are the decades of quiet, patient work that made all of this possible. Today's guest represents that unseen foundation. She has spent over 4 decades working at the intersections of technology, governance, and public service, long before e governance became a term, and long before technology carriers for women were considered normal, let alone encouraged. From academic rigor to institutional leadership, from shaping NIC's role in India's digital journey to later advising election commission, her work reflects three important C's in life: continuity, credibility, and calm leadership. This conversation is not about milestones or titles. It is about choices, challenges, and what it takes to build systems that last, especially when you are doing it quietly, consistently, and often without spotlight. To make it simple, let me also name certain projects which she has done over her work during these years. She has been the part of the team and managed the Arogya Setu application, the most downloadable application in India with 170 million downloads. She is also the one responsible for setting up data centers, NIC data centers, through which many of us, me and you, use various e-governance applications. She has done her master's, her PhD from IIT Delhi. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Dr. Neeta Verma, former Director General NIC and later Advisor to Election Commission of India. Welcome, ma'am, and thank you for being with us. We are very delighted to have you here with us. So we will discuss about your journey. I'll ask you certain questions, and probably we'll like to understand how your journey has taken shape over this period of time. So tell us about where you grew up and how that environment shaped your early interest in technology and public service.
Thank you, Sushant. Thank you for having me here. I grew up in the city of Lucknow. My father was in Indian Railways, and quite a few my uncles were also working in various public sector units. And as I was growing, I was truly impressed by the kind of impact these organizations were making and the kind of scale they were talking, whether it is Indian Railways, or whether many of the PSUs, which are now become Navratnas and all. So that was one aspect which perhaps brought me closer or got me insight into this public sector and its impact over the lives of people. And at the same time, somewhere I always had interest in sciences, and physics was always my favorite subject. So I was doing masters in physics from Lucknow University, where I had a subject on optional subject we used to take. It was on semiconductors.
Oh,
That is where for the first time I got introduced to this whole field of computers and all. Otherwise, as per my initial plan, I was to do masters in physics and then PhD in physics, and then maybe get into some kind of academic profession. But this computers really fascinated me. While working these semiconductors, we got to know. So from there, this trajectory changed, and I went to IIT Roorkee for doing my masters in computers. And after I finished that, at that time, NIC was a kind of a best fit for public sector. It's a promising organization doing a lot of work. It was kind of evolving organization, and one of the best kind of setup it had as far as technology is concerned. So NIC became my natural choice to work there. So that's how it all began.
But there was nothing during your school time or early college days when something prompted you towards technology. It is only when you started doing your post graduation, or it was something during your childhood, apart from the impact from your father's work.
When I was, at that time, I think physics was something I loved. I always admired the way anything in life could be explained, those concepts of physics. So that really fascinated me. So I was always kind of doing something like maybe something in astrophysics or quantum physics. That's how I was. So my another after paper was in quantum physics also.
Oh.
But the semiconductor thing somehow was entirely new. I got exposed to this whole thing only when I was doing my masters, that too in the second year. And from there, this whole thing, and that really fascinated me. Then only we got to know. That time internet was not there, so we only used to hear from a professor or from some more well-versed friends whose parents were in academics and or in technology, that this is a kind of technology which is becoming so promising, and the kind of power it had. And that's how I got fascinated and shifted towards this, from basic sciences to technology.
And we are talking about which university here?
This was Lucknow University,
Mhm.
and then I did my master's in computers from IIT Roorkee. That time it was called University of Roorkee.
Mm.
It was,
Excellent.
that's how it is.
But how many women were actually at that point of a time went towards technology? I mean, when you went to do your masters, you had your colleagues who were doing this?
I think in the, if I'm not mistaken, in the batch of I think there were 15 or 20 people. There were three, including me. But more important was that time in a hostel, because they were graduation also. I still remember there was only one girl who were doing her bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And
Oh.
everyone used to kind of look at, that time choosing that as a career. Yes, it was not that popular with this thing. Technology per se is not like those core sciences, core technologies like mechanical or civil as it was that time. Perhaps, and then awareness also. But I think as we moved, and as statistics says, now there are, if not more, equal number of women in this profession in the early years. It's only as we move towards the board level positions that we start seeing some dwindling.
So you were three girls at that point of a time in your course?
In my course.
And how many boys?
17, total 20, batch of 20.
20.
Yeah.
Oh. Excellent. Excellent. Is there any early influence or early experience in your life which has shaped your experience quietly? I mean, which is not visible, but which has influenced your journey?
Yeah, so when I joined National Informatics Center, I was our Dr. Seshagiri was the DG of NIC, and he, as you all know, is kind of who's, I should say, a father of e-governance.
Yeah.
Or digital governance. He's been instrumental in bringing so many policies. So we were all working with him. He was a visionary, he was a gifted person, but at the same time I saw very closely that he used to work very hard. After that first time, we don't have any internet, we had to only acquire knowledge through these various scientific periodicals and journals. So after office gets over, he used to we got to sit in library for hours and read all those journals. So whenever we talked to him and whenever he asked something, it was always something which, even today, I say it was much ahead of the time. He used to motivate us to think in that direction. And as I started becoming a senior and started having one-to-one discussions, is to sometimes while I'm falling short of, then what conversation he's doing. So that kind of motivated me also, that I also need to study and keep myself up as far as development is concerned. From there on, and I also realized that at any point of time, whether you have to lead a small team or you have to lead a big organization, you need to be really knowing things up to date. And this is more relevant in the domain of technology, which is changing so fast. May not be in other branches, but yes, here it is very relevant. So from there and until today, I have that habit of, at least reading for 1 hour, now maybe 30 minutes, what's happening new. And even today, I keep myself updated. And that I have kept all through. And how it has influenced, if you see my career, I've really changed begin from training division, then get to software development, then web portals, then data centers, to then cloud, and then going to artificial intelligence and cyber security, because continuously I was updating myself. Therefore, I had a confidence that you put me in any domain, I'll be able to. That was a kind of silent domain because of the time I used to invest in this. So I think that habit is even still continued, and I feel really blessed to have that early on.
Yeah, that's a vast journey. And I know the point which you said about Mr. Sheshagiri. We have heard a lot about him, but for the benefit of all, can you just tell a bit about how he started? Because if I understand rightly, he was the one who started National Informatics Center, right? He was the first Director General. So how it shaped up, if
So
you can.
Dr. Seshagiri actually was instrumental in setting up NIC way back in 1976.
Mhm.
At that time when computers and all were not heard of. So he was visionary because lot of technologies which NIC got, like when I joined, we had this big mainframes of Cyber CDC and then Univac and all those things. We had these computers. This whole thing which we talk today about data analytics and databases, I mean, at that time we were introduced. He used to tell, look, government has so much of a data, put it into mainframe and then analyze it and see what kind of insights can be. Even at that particular, though it was called databases that time, not these fancy words, but these all concepts, that what is that can come and how this can help the future planning. That is the initial years we have worked a lot with planning commission, giving them various perspectives of data which is being kind of generated. Then he also understood the connected government is very important, because government launches a lot of schemes. Even you see today, I mean, the day I was writing also somewhere, about 1/4 of government union budget is spent in these beneficiary schemes, subsidies and various other things. And this money finally travels from here and gets finally onto a last mile, which is district and sub district level. So if you really want to make best use and most best outcome of this all expenditure, which is 13 to 14 lakh crore every year, you really need to manage this whole flow and make sure it reaches in time, and it's really being given to the person who deserves it. There's a lot of aspects to it. So he brought connect network, VSAT based network, way back 1990 to 92. We connected all the districts of India. Okay,
That
where we
was
could
NICNet?
really, that was NICNet,
Yeah.
where we could chat with each other. I mean, district collectors that time. Then he brought email. We had X400 mail through which we could. So we had introduced this things like email connectivity to the government much before the concept of internet came onto this. Then 1993 World Wide Web was introduced. 1995 we had the first World Wide Center for Web, this thing. 1996 it was given to me, and we published the first website of the government of India onto this thing, where it was not at all that time prevalent, as far as if you talk about not Indian private industry was also not really using that way. So that way he was always much ahead of his time, because he was always keeping, and since he was a visionary, he could also see through things much before anyone could see. I mean, talking to him was always a pleasure. I mean, it was you always come back so enriched with so many new ideas. It was a
I can
tough
understand.
taskmaster, but at the same time very accommodating.
Mm.
So we still miss him today. So
Yeah, very interesting. And I think because of working with these visionaries, I think that would have defined the moments that would have shaped your career going forward, like you said, right?
Yeah.
Under under his vision or with his leadership, the thoughts which he had.
Yes, of course. In fact, working with him, I still remember when we were doing this exam results we brought on the web for the first time.
Hmm.
CBSE results.
Hmm.
CBSE, there's a whole story, but let me just cut it short. Class 10 and class 12. Then various state boards came online, all results coming. I mean, that is the first time, and this is something he always advised us. And that is the time I first time felt that what is the power of this technology? I mean, how can I really help that person sitting in the remotest part of India to be able to access this result in as much of a convenience as someone sitting in Delhi or looking at these things.
This was done in which year?
It was around 2000, early 2000, I think 2001.
So that would be a very, very change. I mean, a very different thing for the people, right?
Very
That
different.
point of
I mean,
time.
that if you look at that journey, that's gone very long after that, because not only from exam results, we moved on to online counseling platforms, which really brought, I should say, democratized the whole process. Now, whether you come from whatever social background, whether you know someone, whether in your family someone knows, you had an equal access to apply to higher education colleges. You had access to that. After every round, you knew where's your rank. You had the option of coming out of, instead of opting this college, let me opt for this stream. This is a whole game which used to happen, but it was really accessible to very few privileged people who had access to these one-to-one kind of, you may say. But with this online system, even a child sitting in a village of India, as long as he has an internet connection, he also could do his online counseling with the same authority or same power, I should say, as anybody in these urban cities could do. So that stayed with me always. I mean, and maybe that is one of the reason I spent whole of my career, because I realize here when you do a system, see, putting exams was a simple system.
Correct.
But the kind of impact it created, even counseling, though complicated, it became complicated because different colleges had different admission criteria and all. But otherwise, it was a simple IT system that way. But the way it was empowering people was something always stayed with me. And today, when I am looking at any AI system, I always see how is really going to change life of the people who are at the end of this whole tunnel. I mean, the last man.
And you said you launched the first website. That which year that was?
1996.
1996.
Yes.
Wow.
So
That was the first website by NIC.
Yes, by NIC.
Excellent.
And it's all credits to Dr. Seshagiri, because he only kind used to push us, and that at the time, there were no this what should I say, this capacity building workshops or any training anywhere for bureaucrats and all. Still they had their academies. We didn't even have any kind of training, and who will teach us, because things were so new coming us. So that also gave us a confident learning by doing. We set up web servers ourselves and see did it. There was failures also when you set up for the first time, but overall it was a very fulfilling thing.
Excellent. And now coming back to you, your journey at NIC, and when you started working, like you told us when you were in college, there were 3 girls. What was the situation at the workplace that point of a time? And being woman, does it change the dynamics in any way, positively or sometimes in a different way?
I mean, many a times I've been asked this question, but I somehow very firmly, maybe it's my experience over time. First of all, I was privileged to have parents who kind of always encourage their children. So my father, I was the eldest child in the family, was always so invested in my career, in my studies, and every step, he's really supported me. And he took me to admissions. I still remember I had gone to IIT Kanpur for taking exam for PhD exhibition, and so he was always supporting, and he always wanted me to do something big. And that time sciences is something he was also fascinated, and I was also fascinated. So that was the first thing from where I think this whole sense of discrimination somehow I could never see much, honestly. Then when I came to NIC, Dr. Seshagiri was another person who, I don't know whether he was doing consciously, but who always respected your ability and your skill. For him, whether you are a girl or a boy, never kind of mattered. So wherever he could see the potential and and capacity or enthusiasm, he promoted those people. I mean, he used to take very bold decisions, which perhaps today it may not be possible in terms of this thing, bringing people. So, and not only me, if you see, therefore, there are quite a few women in NIC at the senior level really working at the cutting edge technology, be it running the mail service. We had a lady heading our cyber security division for a long time. Our GIS was headed. So I think Dr. Seshagiri gave us that environment where not only discrimination, there was always, what should I say, he really kind of respected the kind of potential you have in the country. And therefore, personally, I never had any incidents ever in life where I felt that there is any kind of this gender thing coming on.
That is such a powerful feedback. I have intentionally asked this question because you see today also we hear a lot of questions about the diversity and how in various areas women's participations are still looked in a different way. And I really get surprised that women like you have worked on this level and in such kind of organizations and in such field for a very long time. I think we just need to change the way in the way people think. Many of us. Your role evolved from a technology and technologist to an institutional leader. How did that transition change the way you took decisions?
See, for me, leadership was never an authority or a power. I always felt that since I've been given this opportunity, I should really use it to make the institution grow and also make it people grow. Therefore, I have during that time always worked on empowering people so that they can put in their best and they could excel in whichever projects or initiatives I was doing. And also, since at that time NIC was there and technology is moving very fast. So while I was technologies, I kind of looked like supposing data centers. So I was always, let me put a new stack, let me put a new set of servers, let me build another data centers. And that is because my thinking was kind of limited to that sense. When I became head of NIC, then a lot of things I have to see how NIC as an institution grows, how it remains relevant in this fast pacing technology, and when you have such a vibrant private sector at the same time. So I took a lot of initiative in terms of opening up centers, like a lot of center of excellence I opened that time in 2016. I opened center of excellence for data analytics for the government. So that idea was to bring this, because as an ICR government, we host one of the most valuable and a large amount of data. I was also driving open data at one point of time. But how do we government makes best use of this data, derive insights from it to do a better planning or better execution of the schemes on the ground? So for that, I opened that, because this capacity get built across the institution, because everybody is dealing with data, whether our state center, the districts. The idea was to empower them, to enable them, so that if they are thinking of something, they could call this COE and get started. Then security, there by that time, Digital India was in a full swing, and and a lot of applications were being launched were directly to the consumed by citizens. So cyber security attacks and all was also on constant rise. So I realized cyber security has to get into designs. We always had this security audit compliance very, very strictly. But the point is that, first of all, that delays your launch, but most importantly, it kind of doesn't give you that sense of security or readiness. So then I opened up a center of excellence for application security. Not only one, I opened 5 centers across 5 states of India, because I thought it's not that all our capacity and technology gets limited to headquarters. It's a big organization. Correct. I connected with my DIOs, opened up some events where these DIOs could come to Delhi and kind of meet the senior management, meet me, and have a sense of belonging to this organization. So it should be a vibrant organization. It should be working on the cutting edge. Then Center of Excellence on blockchain I opened at one point of time, and that I opened in Bangalore, because I thought I have to really distribute this also. So, and then while before coming, I also opened this Center of Excellence for artificial intelligence onto these things. So these small initiatives were basically to make sure that as technology moves, NIC also has that kind of a technology capability and capacity to deliver relevant solutions to this. So NIC became my focus. NIC's growth became my purpose. NIC's people, empowering them was my focus. Then those building technology stand and expanding data centers.
Yeah, so from a project centric approach or a department centric approach, as a leader, your approach become how the organization at a larger level is contributing to the governance and to various projects. Uh, and we can understand, yeah, the good leaders always look at how the dots are connecting and how one is impacting the other. So in that same flow, if I may ask, as a director general of NIC, I used to take meetings from Mr. N. Vijay Ditta, फिर बाद में गैरोला साहब के पास, then YK Sharma sir. By the time you came, I have met you also in that capacity when you were in DG NIC. बड़ा मुश्किल काम क्या होता है बियॉन्ड टेक्नोलॉजी डिसीजंस विच आई अंडरस्टैंड, उसमें तो आपकी महारत रहती है, बट यू नो समथिंग बियॉन्ड टेक्नोलॉजी इन टर्म्स ऑफ द कल्चर, इन टर्म्स ऑफ यू नो द एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज, या कोई ऐसा थिंग जो कि नॉट जो टेक्निकल नहीं है बट पीपल मैनेजमेंट के एस्पेक्ट से बड़ा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है, हाउ डू यू?
You know, when I took up SDG and IC, that time we were into very tough situation. You know, we have this regular periodical 4 years appraisal reviews, and then people are giving promotion depending on how this happened. For last quite a few years when I took up, I think if not mistaken, about 10 years or maybe more, this whole thing had got stuck into a policy impasse. People, the reviews were not taking place because there was some policy, this thing, जब वो policy ठीक होगा तभी review शुरू होंगे. People were not getting promoted. And this was really because this was very demotivating for the people. They were still performing, many of them still had that big rigor and vigor in them, but large number of people were demotivated with all these things. So my first challenge was, how do I get? So I really had to work with the government, my secretary, DOPT, and then going till the PMO and make sure. And that was one of the most, it took about, I think, 6 months or even more to get and finally conducting interviews. And we had a huge backlog of so that we appraisals and then interviews and then those things, out of policy changes, approvals we needed, how could we do 2 consecutive in one, and lot of exceptions also we took. So I think I was very, I really had to work hard, and somewhere I felt, since I was a part of these people and I felt them as my own people, so I could speak with a lot of conviction, as if it's my own promotion at stake, kind of this thing. And therefore I was really successful in impressing upon all those people that this is really necessary for NIC to perform, and NIC to kind of give you, one side you have Digital India and other side where NIC is playing such a key role. That was tough because you had to learn a lot of administrative rules. You have to talk to all those people in their language so that you could convince them, go at various places. But I'm really happy because I could do that, because I could that became kind of a history for us, that we could really promote and do this thing. Second thing, what happened during these times, we also had some additional charges before I kind of took up. A lot of people got demotivated and kind of did not keep pace with the technology as we used to keep when Dr. Seshagiri, and even after Dr. Viditya and Dr. Garola, Dr. Sharma, they were all technology people mentored by Dr. Seshagiri. So that kind of rigor also somewhere took a backseat, particularly in our districts, connection with district to some extent got. So therefore I really had to work very hard on, so a lot of new things in NIC, NIC Day, Dr. Seshagiri Day, our districts day, where I used to call all of those people, used to have, these conventions of 500 people, 600 people, all logistics. But I must also say, I would like to acknowledge the contribution or the support of all my senior colleagues. All my senior colleagues were so supportive. Anybody I requested, you take up this responsibility, they did it. They rather, I think, surpassed my expectations, and we could do few things so beautifully. that it look back, it looks difficult, that how could we, every 3 months we used to have some kind. Idea was to connect people, make them feel part of the organization. And when they were here, and not only we used to do all other things, we used to do a lot of technology feed to them. Lot of hackathons we launched, lot of things we did where we could bring these people. So a lot of hackathons, district level hackathon, state level hackathon. Then when they used to, who's winning, acknowledging them, sometimes on VC, sometimes going there. So which kind of brought the technology rigor back in the organization. And it was again kind of became same vibrancy. Everybody is trying to work into technology domain. So that was also something which took time, which took a lot of effort. But I think with the help of all my senior colleagues, it all became easy and it was very enjoyable. Still miss those, after office till later 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, we are sitting and struggling. How do we really solve this issue? I mean, how do we approach this issue so that, we get the proper approvals from secretary, from ministers. So fortunately, we had a good set of secretaries that time who really supported us, who valued us. We had an honorable minister who also helped us. Dr. Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad was there, who also helped us immensely in while we were going through this struggle.
So collaboration and people connection.
Yes, collaboration and trust among the people
Trust
was
among the people.
very, and with a common purpose. Everybody had a common vision.
Common
NIC
goal.
has. We are
Yes.
doing for NIC.
Yes,
So that I think
that became significant.
that became very significant.
Okay, so now having witnessed India's e-governance journey for so long, what do you think would be the most defining shift? A technology or a policy or a mindset?
See, if you look at India's e-governance, it has basically has three phases. One was earlier times when digitalization and all was happening. Mainframes came, mini computers came, and then we have personal computers. That was a time the use of technology was primarily used for increasing productivity, for increasing efficiency of the people, to be able to do your work much so more internally focused. How do you make government more productive, government more efficient?
The interdepartment.
Interdepartment within the government itself,
Correct.
But when then came NEGP, National E-Governance Plan, this was one of the major shift. This had three components. First component was how do you that's citizen centric. How do you make these services now available to citizens directly? Till that, the window systems and all those things. And second thing was building these basic infrastructures of state data centers and wide area networks, national knowledge network. All those things came that time. And third, of course, was more about the project, mission mode project. This passport, MCA 21, all these projects have come as a part of that, where the project was declared as a mission mode project. So availability of all kinds of resources, manpower, funds was available to them on a continuous basis. So these projects could really become successful at a national level, and we all are beneficiaries. Passport service, anyone you ask prior to that and how it is today.
Yeah.
So that was so first thing. So it really turned that thing, and since that time, internet. This is I'm talking of 2006. So we didn't have this mobile penetration. So citizen services came, but in assisted mode. Common service centers, Me Seva, all
Correct.
those things
Correct.
start. Every
Correct.
state had that. You all must have
Yeah.
seen, opening up those common
Correct.
service
Correct.
centers,
Yes.
citizen
Yes.
service
Citizen
centers,
service.
kind of
CSC we used to call them.
CSCs, and
Yeah.
then various states had their own
Correct.
formulation.
Correct.
Then came Digital India. Digital India, if you remember its inauguration, Honorable Prime Minister had made a call not only to government but also to private that we have to make India digital.
Correct.
And that really gave this infrastructure impetus, whether it is broadband connectivity, whether it is mobile connectivity, affordable data connections and things like this. So it now became possible that citizens could directly consume services onto their own mobiles, onto their sitting at the comfort of their home. So that brought a different journey, because now you could do applications which will be directly consumed by the citizens. So the issues of language, digital literacy, all those things came, and the Digital India started coming. You could transfer fund which could directly reach into the bank account of an individual. Direct benefit transfer is one of the very revolutionary initiative of the government. And if you really see, it is interesting to see, today 6.6 lakh crore rupees get transferred through this mechanism where you really have a instant, and there is no much technology had to be done, because this whole concept of a foundational platforms, if you have a Aadhaar number or you had a bank account number, money could be transferred to you. It was that simple as that. And one file department sends to a common system which NIC had built is called public finance, which government was using for their own fund transfers at point. Same system got scaled. That's what I was telling. It was interoperable. It could develop certain OPIs. We had a very bright team definitely there. And the various ministries could connect their IT systems. And it almost became, today the file is approved and the second day the funds are transferred. So within days we used to, rather within hours also for PM Kisan, I remember we had transferred the funds to the crores of beneficiaries to their bank accounts, which could be any branch, any bank in this country. So that is a kind of, so that happened. It was internally looking, then it became citizen focused, and then it became the last mile delivery. So so I think we've come a long way, and now we, in any case, getting into a new era of AI. Into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very simply put forward and very in a very impactful way. So three major things, like you said: productivity in between the departments first, then citizen services through CSCs and in indirect ways to make citizens' life better, and then digital India, where governance became at scale for masses.
In fact, when I took up, there was first thing I had done was mobile first. That any application you do, it should be first mobile accessible. It should be a mobile app or a mobile accessible. The desktop and all should be a second priority, so that everybody could easily access. Then that brought the user experience and design thinking also to the forefront of the citizen.
And during COVID, Arogya Setu was one of the applications.
See, during COVID, Arogya Setu was one thing, but what was more important is, because everybody, government had to function, and people were really, they were either getting infected, or they were really not very confident of coming. Some had other health problems and all. So we had to bring whole of government online. We had this beautiful product called e-office, which was done by my dear friend Rachna Srivastava. She is the architect of this product. This e-office enables government to do entire functioning, that the files concept can be completely removed. Everything can be paperless. Yeah. You could create your file there, it could process, it could really, and you could send this, it could go from a lowest level functioning file could travel till the minister on that system itself.
And one can see the status also.
You can see the status, you can see the senior management can see the pendency and everything onto this. And that was brought a lot of green concept, lot of other things around it. So we had to bring, so a lot of officers were using, every ministry had e-office because cabinet secretariat and prime minister had said that you have to have e-office. But they were not using it that much. And if they were using with the assistance of their staff.
Right.
Here they had to themselves use it.
Yes.
So onboarding all those people, bringing them on e-office so that they're able to clear their files, because everything with the mask or medicines, logistics, food had to move. And ultimately some approvals had to be given, funds had to be dispersed. So we really, I should really thankful to all those NIC officers, even during COVID time, along with me, they will come to office, and even when they had some infection, they'll work from home. And that was one major task. Second thing was video conferencing, because meetings, because it was a new thing.
Correct.
So everybody was kind of, whether it is state governments.
Correct.
So morning you're doing prime minister's meeting, afternoon doing some chief minister's meeting. So our VC team was so overworked, but I don't think even a single meeting we refused anyone. And lot of decisions, and the whole COVID, the country could manage all those crises so well. Lot of credit goes to this people working a silent, these things who made these things possible because of the technology, because of interactions were happening. Prime Minister could take pulse what is happening on the ground by talking to district collectors, all those things. So these were two things. Arogya Setu was definitely, had partners from the industry also, was something very, very, I should say, a concept where you are directly into the touch with each and every citizen, and what you're doing is actually mattering to him. So
That actually became the bridge,
a
Setu,
bridge
between
onto this
people
thing.
and taking
It also
appointments.
further went and then also did I mean connected with the ICF vaccination schedule and all those things. But it was an a really I mean very good memories I have. You know, all of us used to, I mean, I used to go to office because that's what needed. I have been into office, not even a single day I missed my office during whole of this COVID wave. You know,
You used to go to office?
yes, I have not even missed office a single day.
You mean NIC headquarters?
NIC
At
headquarters,
Lodi Road?
yes, Lodi Road.
Oh.
I used to go every day because see, so many things had to be mobilized, technology, and if I difficult to do things from home. In office, it used to be far more simpler. Some of my colleagues also. It's not that I'm coming. Some of my colleagues also used to come. Sometimes we used to talk to each other sitting in the same building or BCs
Yeah.
in the so that we should not catch infection
Correct,
or transmit
correct.
infection. But yes, it was kind of there. But to Arogya Setu, everybody used to connect, you know, some people in office, some people in home, and sometimes midnight we used to have discussions whenever we are rolling out. It was an evolving application, so lot of new changes, and every new change before that you had to really think of pros and cons. How is it going to look? Is it going to confuse people, or is it going to really help them? It should not scare them too much. So all those things had to be done. And towards the end it also came to issues of privacy and all, so we had a new thing to handle. That how can you really open this application for anyone to audit and see that there is no privacy issue into it, and how do you prepare the whole which has been application which has been done in such a crisis thing. So while I'm really happy that people were benefited, but it was a lot of learning for us also in that process, you know, which that how do you build those systems which are these population scale and serve public at large.
Excellent. You know, they say in calamities, they create opportunities, and such actions are
Yes.
very fine examples of how it is done. And yes, you're right. During COVID, I think COVID was a calamity, but from certain aspects, it helped humankind doing certain things which would have done in number of years, say ages. For example, like you said, people were not used to virtual meetings, no matter how earlier they were launched, and also using the systems on their own rather than through people. So yes, that I think gave us a rapid acceleration.
Yes. Not only government, you see, even in the private industry
Yeah,
also.
everyone.
Telemedicine. I
Exactly.
never thought doctors will start consulting on these
Correct.
things. I mean, I have doctors at home also. This not going to
Aha,
work. Who will consult
Who
patient?
will do it? Correct.
But now this is slowly
Yes.
and slowly, and perhaps that's a boon for India because the
Yes.
kind of ratio we have between doctors and patients, it's almost, you know, unimaginable to be able everybody to have a good access to a good health care that way. It's really helped. Education used to be small. Primary school children are being taught onto this.
Exactly.
And now, how is, you know, Delhi government, whenever there is a little pollution issue, chalo
Yeah.
kal se remote.
Now, yes, it's a remote
So
classes.
it's
Yeah.
become kind of a way of life. So it's really helped. And I think it has somewhere also given a lot of push to digital transformation. But a lot of industry realized that people who were not digitally enabled really suffered during COVID time. Their businesses suffered. They
Correct.
saw disruptions. And who were digitally enabled, they not only could survive, they could do a lot of innovation at that time. A lot of companies, you see, startups have
Yes.
really flourished out of this
Absolutely.
COVID kind of a
Absolutely.
thing.
People build platforms so that people can take appointments of the
Appointment.
doctors and
Not
come on
only
a
medicine,
platform.
almost everything.
Everywhere,
This
yes, in
quick
every field.
commerce, all those
Exactly.
things. Even other day I was reading to some, there is some very popular yoga platform in India. That boy was also saying, is also from IIT, that this idea came and picked up only during
during
COVID.
COVID,
People
correct.
were not able to go and do-
people accepted that. Otherwise, they
Yes.
were saying, "नहीं, मेरे को तो सामने ही कोई चाहिए
सामने ही
सिखाने
वो
के लिए."
चाहिए.
Exactly.
So it
Exactly.
really made a lot of transformation, and I
It
think
did.
digitally also people got lot of people who never had done Skype and all those things, our grandparents and all.
Yes.
Now everybody
Everybody-
has learned how to digitally
Yeah, yeah.
connect.
In fact, they can use WhatsApp far better than many of the.
Yeah, so
you know.
that's been a good thing.
Excellent. So, okay, this I could, we discussed about all your work at NIC, and obviously with your discussion, I can see that you got a lot of pleasure, and what gave you larger satisfaction is your citizen-facing work, where the citizen engagement increased. So, coming to your work with institutions like Election Commission of India, uh, how did the experience there reshape your understanding of governance? Because it is beyond NIC, right? It is after your work at NIC now.
So when I went to election commission, I was actually made to sit on the other side of the table.
Yes.
Because and this side you have to do technology. I will do this, but you make sure that you get into these. You make sure availability of funds. You make sure these approvals are done. When I went to election commission, you had to really look into all the aspects yourself. On one side you had these BLOs sitting into these remote areas and see that their grievances are met. On the other side, you make sure, while you have to make system adaptable to them, on the other side you have to make sure that you capture data which is of best quality, highest accuracy, and on the other side you make sure that you have to keep all data protection measures in place, because this is a data which has such high significance involved to its this thing. So it was kind of looking from all aspects. You really feel that but what I really felt in while doing all these systems, especially at election commission, that as long as you have your target audience, whether it is your BLOs, whether it is people who are going for voting, if you have a compassion or if you have empathy for these people, your systems also start kind of falling into this. Another thing which we learned in election commission is, because election, when you launch a party, supposing voter turnout you have launched, it will be launched on, and you will see its impact, usability, everything on that particular day. And you can't afford to fail.
Yes.
You will not get a second chance.
Exactly.
Particularly when we are reading for this election, this Lok Sabha election 20, which is the largest election, worldwide.
2024 one.
2024. I mean, on to this thing. You had to make sure that everything goes right, and it has to go right in the first. So that is where testing of the thing or doing dry runs really took the forefront. I mean, the kind of dry runs or the kind of testing I have subjected to these systems, perhaps I have never done that kind of work ever earlier, because there's no second chance, and to make sure it happens, all kind of simulations and testing. And I think that is important today when you're talking of resilient systems. Even if somebody says that your security is all in place, still, and your DR is in place, your BCP action is in place, unless you do it, you can't wait it to be happening on that day of disaster and then see whether your system is a banking service or it's any mission critical service. If you wait for that day, you could be in for surprises. So therefore it is important that you do enough dry runs, you do enough test runs prior to, and
it is ready to use.
You are
without
sure
fail.
You are giving a guarantee it will run.
Correct.
I mean, that is how I was asked. "Sab theek chalega
No
na?"
excuses.
No, where is excuse?
Correct.
You can't hold
Correct.
elections on this
Correct.
thing. It has to run.
Yes.
System has to perform. It has to perform. And then when you have
Right.
so many people, and you are in the public audit, you have political parties.
Correct.
Anything going slightly wrong could.
Yeah.
So not only on the front end, back end also we did so many things so that in case of anything happens, how are we? So a lot of preparation. And lot of thought to, and I was very happy. I was very fortunate here also. We had a very visionary CEC who was. So he always used to call us and say, if this thing goes wrong, kya karoge? So kind of you made you think of all worst possibilities and make your system ready and make provisions in the system to be invoked at that point of time.
That is a very powerful
So
thought. Yeah.
that the truly always on system, for which you can give the guarantee. You can't give guarantee, but then you can be really sure it will work, was a different ball game.
Yeah, making it right first time. And so
yes.
you are prepared from the very beginning that this is how you have to do
you
it.
have to do a lot of preparation.
Correct.
You have to do a lot of think through in all
Yeah.
these things, because the real life situation is very different. So where it can go wrong is not kind of.
I really wish if everyone can take that approach, because I sincerely believe what you're saying is something which can change the narrative overall. Change the narrative not only for our our personal lives and professional lives, but for the country as such.
Yes. It's important, and we are fortunate that today we have technology components ready. You see, many of the banking applications, many of these social media are really working always on kind of is, and that's what I tell my colleagues. If you public systems have to be population scale systems. I have so many stories to narrate that if we have built a system and it crashes when it is at the peak usage, howsoever infrastructure I give you, even if I give you whole of Amazon, you will still not be able to make it run unless your architecture is done that way. So make these things, you could get an incremental access, but if you really want to get this kind of a leapfrog into that population scale, you have to build in your architecture.
Correct.
And this is what I used to really insist upon all my colleagues. You may not see, I mean, initially system, we will see when the system use pick up. So I tell them, when system use pick up, you will never have this opportunity.
Exactly.
We will make the government showdown, we'll make, like I say, in government service, you never get any recognition that way. Nobody knows who's doing what.
Yes.
But if something goes wrong, the
Then you
organization,
definitely know.
you definitely know that. So you
Uh,
have to really avoid
absolutely,
that. So
absolutely.
that's how it.
Very
used to be.
wonderfully put up. Okay, so looking back now, say connecting the dots,
Hmm.
which principle or belief you think has defined the carrier? I mean, which is not written in any policy document or which is not written somewhere, but you think uh, that guided your work quietly.
See, I have two things which I've always kept. One is whatever work given to you, you have to excel in that. Put in your best this way or that way, you have to excel in that. You have to do it to the best of your capability. Second thing is, when I'm working, I have two interests. One is my organization. So my organization, and when I was head of NIC also, as I told you, organization growth, organization flourishes was always, even when I was not DG NIC, anything I did, I always used to feel, is any of my action can bring NIC name bad. I don't have to do that. And third thing is that when I'm, especially, I mean, in the larger part, when we started doing these population scale systems, that last person on in this queue also should be able to these systems. Therefore, running offline systems, running inclusion into the whole system. I did a lot of work with people with various disabilities or various divyang or special abilities. Even they should, because technology is a big enabler for them. So that last person on that queue was always in my mind whenever I was reviewing or sitting in a meeting, that whether that component, because these again components are design level components. Later it loses its opportunity to do this. So public interest, organization interest, and self excellence.
Excellent. Public interest, organization interest, and
Self excellence.
self
Excellence.
excellence. Excellent. So now let me come to the most happening subject which everybody wants to talk about. And I think you have recently written some blogs about it as well, artificial intelligence. So today, conversations around AI and emerging technologies are moving very fast. Almost everybody is talking about it. From your experience, what should government be genuinely excited about and what they should be cautious of when they are using AI?
See, the last 2 years, the lot has changed as well as AI is concerned, especially after this generative AI became more of a democratized kind of a thing. And a lot of other things have. And as a result, what we used to think is will be coming is not really mainstream. In 2 years now, all that has become a reality. Everything is technically feasible. The implementation of AI or any digital transformation project is a little different, because the only difference, the larger difference is AI really sits on data. Okay, so your data readiness, data quality, while keeping the guardrails of data privacy and all those things, has to be ready. So whenever you're getting into any AI domain, you need to make sure whether your that major building block is really ready, or which can be really given to the AI model. Otherwise, that old theory of garbage in, garbage out can really manifest itself when it comes to AI kind of a thing. It could create biases, it could really have hallucinations, all those
Correct.
things. Second thing, which is important, so and so therefore, so that's one aspect of it. Second thing is, you also have to kind of keep in mind, because you are delegating some aspects, decision making, to AI for that matter. So use, and then you have to fix some accountability also. So how do you really work out this whole framework? Accountability has to be somewhere on some human or institution. So therefore, I feel decision AI should be used not for making decisions, not for making judgments, but for supporting decisions by onto these things. And that is the reason I said, when we are doing these pilots, at that time we have to really make sure these things in advance, because if you just do a pilot because it's a happy looking pilot, it will succeed. But when you go to the ground, you are basically, posing these questions: where is the data? Is the data that good on which the model can run? Do they have any concerns on any kind of legal or other constraints? uh, are we really ready? That, because when you're doing pilots, normally it's IT who's taking it, but finally who will take a ownership of the whole thing? So those things, and for that I feel the senior management in government or in corporate has to understand the nuances of AI. You may not know how to do it, but you need to understand nuances of AI. How do you really bring, how do you judicially choose the use case? And when you're choosing a use case, see the implementation in mind. Answer these questions upfront. Only when you're satisfied, go up. So asking the right questions and making a right decision, you need to understand this whole thing of AI, that how this whole thing will unfold as you launch it. And if you put that focus there, I think technology wise, we are not limited. It's really ready. I mean, like a few things, as I'll just tell you example. As I was telling you, a lot of government schemes are there. All government schemes more or less pattern. If you build up some kind of AI into it, that can be modules could be replicated right from formulating a scheme, identifying the beneficiaries, disbursement of this, detection of fraud if it's happening anywhere, and the last mile connection with citizens, where generative AI becomes really powerful because it cuts across languages. This is an important application where it could be done. Helping government increasing their productivity through these AI agents and all, you can think through, where it's just helping you. It's not taking a decision. It's a very good use case. Doing a co-pilot for various government workflows and all could be done, which could work through this. Generative AI in any case is always another thing. Maybe the yes, and in any case, healthcare education is our long fetch. I mean, good quality education, good care, healthcare has a lot of scope, and not only in just those, in the administration of these things, also AI can do can help in a big way. And I think we should take it, but we have to always keep. It should not have any bias. There should be an accountability. Most importantly, there should be explainability. These things have to be built in this. And judicious selection of use cases is most important. And for that, you need to understand the nuances of AI.
Yes, and you have to have patience because the training would require certain time.
Training
So
will
the
require
outcome
time.
would be a bit late.
And you
but
have to be associated with
Associated
them, because
with-
models have to be
Correct.
trained there. In domain input from you have to come.
Correct,
You just
correct.
can't outsource to someone and say that you just do that model, train, and bring it for me tomorrow.
You said a very interesting point because I remember when NVIDIA CEO was in Bombay, somebody asked him, will AI really take the job of people? And he said, AI will not take the job of the people. AI would only take the job of those people who don't know or who will not know how to use AI to improve their work. And I think that's the point you are also stating, that in government also, or in any field probably, AI can be used as a tool to take better decisions, or say evidence-based decision making. And obviously AI bias and hallucinations are the real threat, not only in words. So absolutely right. Okay, so when you have said this, I also remember one of your blogs, you said security should be by design, because cyber security is a major threat. It should not be just for a checklist, and it should be from the start, not towards the end of it. I think both security should be by design and AI should also be by design, not just for some use case.
Yeah, I think security wise, security is a double
Edged sword.
sword. It can be
Yeah.
very effectively used for uh, prevention or defense purposes on the systems, and it also used can be built for manifesting the attacks on you. And therefore, and see, the people who are into this cyber attack, they will definitely exploit AI to do these things.
Correct.
And if we do not use AI into monitoring our own systems, then we in any case are going to lose battle. I mean, the speed at which they'll come, and with this quantum computing coming onto it. So security has to be designed, and as I said, security is no more just the system is safe. That era is gone. Security means system has to perform even when something goes wrong. That resilience has to be built into the system.
Correct.
And for that, what is needed? Early detection. And AI can be your best friend
Best
in early
friend,
detection.
correct.
If you really are mindful and you put this something which humans could not do, they can really do very effectively,
Exactly.
24/7, without any, what should I say, what do you call it, any kind of a lethargy or any kind of
Yeah, without any kind of a gap, you
gap
can be
onto
proactively
it.
ready for it.
Proactively ready for
Yes.
this. You have to take them, but again, just putting AI and then sleeping over it not
Yes.
work. If you're getting 2 o'clock night, I mean, in ECI, that system used to work beautifully.
Hmm.
We had outsourced this activity where these SOC function used to work, and we used to get alerts, and then alerts at medium, high. I mean, which is something we only help them define. But if that alert is, and that had escalation matrix, if alert has to come to somebody in the 2 of night, if they have not acted in a certain time, that person was also questioned. So every week I used to take meeting, and where these people who are building used to say these many your high alerts were acted or reacted these many times. So
Correct.
everybody knew that next meeting I have to.
Yeah.
That over the time brings a culture.
Correct.
And then after that time, it becomes your habit.
Yes,
You have to
yes,
basically
yes.
initially put on to this thing. So security, AI I should not say AI by design, but yes, today what you're doing in whatever, even if you're building a normal IT system, supposing you're building a system, there's a lot of data collected on there. Just see how can you repurpose this data to give some insights to the senior ups there. So use little AI wherever you could, and always keep in mind, where can I apply AI?
Correct.
One thing which is common, and I think the two things which I think cut across all. One is developing co-pilots, which is very safe, and it really increases your efficiency, productivity, and it decreases your discretion at the same time. Second thing which is important is generative AI. I mean,
Correct.
you are able to connect with your citizens irrespective of the language, irrespective of their literacy. That's a huge thing.
That's the best use
In
case.
my career, a lot of time it used to be a dream for me. How do I build a system which whole of India, irrespective of the language and dialect, they could access instant?
Yes.
I don't have to translate and keep those pockets. Iska translation directory, wo sab nahi, automatic. That is what this new generative AI has made.
And उनको लगे कि वो वाकई किसी से बात कर रहे हैं, because that's
human
where-
like feeling.
Exactly.
So which is something I think government, if gets to connect with citizens, it will have a very transformative effect, not only for this thing, for even the relationship between government to citizen will also kind of this thing.
Absolutely.
You must definitely do it, but use judiciously. See what is the right use case.
Use judiciously. That's what Dr. Neeta says. Okay, Dr. Neeta. So now coming to from AI to another most known these days, Gen Z. So if I ask you for a young professional, if you have to suggest her to build a meaningful career in public sector or in e-governance, or say in any field, what would you ask them to focus on first? I'm giving you 3 options and then you can explain. Skills or mindset, speed or depth, visibility or credibility, or maybe all, I don't know.
No, it's not really all. The first thing is definitely mindset. If you have an attitude, because I always say you have to have learning agility. You should lifelong be ready to learn new things. For that, first of all, you need an attitude.
Correct.
To learn this thing. Maybe you think today you are up to the mark, but you don't know. 3 months down the line, you may feel this thing. So you have to continuously. It's not that ek certificate course kar liya, dusra certificate. Continuously, you have to learn. So mindset is first, and definitely skills you have to acquire. I mean, now if you're in technology domain, you have to do it. Another important thing in public sector is you need to have an empathy and you need to have a compassion. Unless you have that empathy for the people at the end for whom you are working, that last mile problem. Like I have a very common saying that even if one person in India could not avail service using your IT system, that means you have failed in your purpose. I mean, somewhere you have not done the design well, therefore he could not use on that particular phone, or on the connection was down or system crashed or whatever. So that you have to always think what is at stake for that person, and that empathy. If you have empathy for people, because empathy for people, you have compassion, you will be able to really, your career will be very rewarding.
Correct.
You have that sense of satisfaction. Second was, what did you ask?
No, I asked. Speed or depth?
Depth, I will always go for depth. I
Mm.
mean, you really have to be knowing. Depth is first thing. I mean, speed is okay. I mean, sometimes you will have a pressure, you may have to do things time bound, but you have to keep in mind, you have to understand things at the core to be able to, because long runs, those things will only, especially when you're coming to AI, you need to understand the working of that system to that depth to be able to really develop a model around it which works across, which does not have bias, which has all these decision making, these things. So depth to me is definitely more important than speed.
And last, visibility or credibility?
Credibility.
Mm.
You know, especially in public sector, don't think of any visibility. Visibility will only come when something will fail. It's as clear as this.
Yes.
And so credibility is very important. I mean, I think your integrity and credibility is very, very important in public sector. And that only comes when you have kept yourself up to date, you have been making, when you're building these IT systems, you're making your design choices right, you're performing them with complete commitment and dedication, and that is how your credibility comes. If I have done an IT system and if it surpasses the expectation of my user, I mean, as I was telling some your colleagues in the morning, that you, even if your client is, or the government department is not asking for, there are some things which are non-negotiable in public sector IT systems. You need to build, and that is where your credibility increases. You need to do what is good, what is best for these things, even if other person, even if they have not asked for a security compliance, you still have to have security by design. So that commitment has to happen. You have to put all data integrity, you know, your citizen data, even if RFP is not saying, please put in those messages. That is where your credibility will. And if you make these choices design time, it is not too much of an extra cost. Is that what stage you are making this decision? It matters.
Very well explained. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. But I again repeat what Dr. Neeta said for Gen Z. One is consistency, two is credibility, and third is empathy. Obviously, with a good mindset, depth of the subject which you choose to move ahead with. Thank you so much, ma'am, for providing the insights to your journey. And thank you again for being here. Thank you.
I also enjoyed talking and living through so many of my earlier experiences or the journey which I had over 4 decades. Thank you.
Thank you so much.